Don't you hate pants?
She cried to the southern wind about a love that would shoot you in. Every dream in her heart was gone, heading for a showdown. Bad dreamer, what's your name? Looks like we're riding on the same train. Looks as though there'll be no rain. It's gonna be a showdown.
We need this win, you know. We got a lot of losses.
Yeah, we got a lot of losses. Start making That's what we're here for, guys, to win.
Welcome. It's Giles and the Goalies podcast. Giles Farrell, joined as always by my partner in crime, Ben Remington.
Hello.
We had to make a detour from our regularly scheduled Grumpy's appearance due to a Mother's Day brunch. So we detoured very far away into St. Paul to Tom Reid's Hockey City pub because I'm not going anywhere else, let's be honest. Let's just get that out of the way.
Yeah, oddly enough, I've been to Tom Reid's 2 days in a row now.
More than I have.
Yeah, which is weird because it's like, you know, I was certainly nothing against Tom Reid's. I actually came here yesterday. I brought my brother because we were looking for a place to watch the game, and I kind of want to bring him here. He had never been here before because he spent most of his adult life in Milwaukee because that's where he went to college and that's where he lives now. So, you know, it's kind of a institution, I would say, on the St. Paul side of things, especially for hockey fans. So I figured I'd bring him here and we watch the playoff game.
That's what I tell people. Come down here, want to watch a game or something.
Yep.
Come here. If you don't go to the game, come to Tom Reid's. It's a good time.
Yep.
That and the amount of salary I've given Tom over the years.
I was going to say, we should get some free drinks for this. I definitely paid for this beer.
Well, I think it was last year. I had a goal to, every time after the game, I'd come in and make it a point to shake Tom's hand in the hopes that he would remember me. Well, that never happened. He never remembered me. So he remembers the guy who coined the big omelet, but not me. No, it's probably for good reason. But
yeah,
I guess since it is Mother's Day and your pink hat, happy Mother's Day to all the moms who listen to this show.
All three?
I'm betting it's all two of you.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening. Boy, I was just sitting here today thinking about what we're going to talk about. I have no idea. No idea what we're going to talk about today.
You know, again, because this same exact situation happened when Mike Yeo got fired. People who know me well enough know that I'm a little on the reclusive side. I'm a little on the lay on my couch and watch sports all night side. But when Mike Yeo got fired, I had plans with friends. I was at my friend's house. Mike Yeo got fired, and would have been plenty of time had I spent any other Saturday night of my life on my couch to do an emergency podcast, given the situation. I mean, granted, we were able to podcast with Tom the next day, so that worked out really well. That we had a great episode the next day. So, and then again yesterday, my little brother is in town from Milwaukee, and I bring him here. And I do not have the podcasting equipment in my truck, which I usually did. But this season, I kind of stopped. I started keeping it at home just so nothing happens to it, basically. Now that we've got a fancy mixer. And yeah, again, Bruce Boudreau is officially hired while I'm out and about, having what shred of nightlife I actually have, and we cannot do an emergency podcast again. So I don't know. I think we're running out of things.
The one night you're out on a Saturday night and I'm at home.
I know, right? Because that's what happened last time too. When Yo got fired, you were at home, and I was out with my friends. I was up in Forest Lake, and you're like, "Hey, do you want to do an emergency podcast?" I'm like, "I would love to, but I'm sitting on the couch at my buddy's house, and we're all drinking, so I really can't." So yeah, sure enough, this summer, like Mikko Koivu was going to get traded. The one Saturday that I'm out with my friends, that's basically almost a guarantee.
No, it'll happen when in the draft when I'm at a wedding that week.
Yeah,
so there's
that's
just going to
right.
be these massive moves, and I'm just going to be completely away from everything. And
I'm going to be it.
I'm also going to point out that this podcast is being recorded with a signed photo of Jacques Lemaire sitting over my shoulder.
It is. It's fitting.
The ghost of Jacques.
Yes. So yeah,
There's your title.
Bruce Boudreau.
Hey, they got Bruce Boudreau. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't some drunken thing I thought up. They actually did that. How about that? Thank you, Ottawa, for being cheap.
Oh, I know, right? Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, when you hear about the details, that he kind of preferred Ottawa, and we talked about this last week with Tom. He preferred them, for a lot of reasons. I think their roster is a little bit younger, and maybe you could argue has a little bit more promise than the Wild roster. Probably not as many issues as the Wild roster, as if we've come to discover, if Boudreau has read anything about this team in the last season. But credit to Craig Leopold for not being Eugene Melnick, basically, for shelling out the big bucks. Boudreau gets a 4-year deal for around $12 million, just a shade under $12 million, I guess, and Ottawa just wasn't willing to spend that coin. But that's okay, because they got their number one choice anyway. Guy
Boucher, clearly number one on everyone's list.
Yeah, he was their number one choice, even though they offered a contract to Bruce Boudreau like Friday night. But good for them. They're glad to hear they got their first choice too, because we definitely got ours.
Well, I could write a book on how that was not Ottawa's first choice.
Right.
But I don't know. There's still just kind of some negative people out there just tried to poo-poo this news last night, and I'm just busy running around my own home, happy that the Wild did something good.
Right.
They did something smart for once.
Yeah.
And right by side.
I don't get how you have negativity about the Bruce Boudreau news. Don't get me wrong.
Well,
I mean, his playoff record is obviously,
it leaves much to be desired,
right.
Yes. But my big thing is, okay, you want consistency in the regular season, you're probably going to get it with this guy. Like, he has 8 division titles in 9 years, and that
Right.
1 year he was fired.
Yeah.
So that is 7 more division titles than the Wild have. Sorry, I can't do math. But I don't know. They are definitely in the right by just handing him essentially a blank check. Just like, here you go. And that's what they did on Saturday after his meeting in Ottawa. They just said, okay, here is a lot of money.
Yep.
Just take it. And he did.
Yeah, and so, I mean, it's the negativity. I think we should just kind of squash that right out of the bat. You know what? I understand a little bit of negativity, or maybe not having full faith in Bruce Boudreau being the coach that's finally going to win this team a cup. I get that. He's not a proven cup winner. I mean, as you want to put that in air quotes, I guess, proven cup winner. I don't know. To me, it doesn't hold a lot of weight, because there's a lot of coaches who are going to win a cup who haven't won a cup yet. I've never really liked that argument. Randy Carlyle has a cup. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like if that's
up.
the argument you want to make, then let's dance. Let's have that argument.
Let's dance.
Right. That's a flaming hot take.
Don't you hate pants?
Yeah.
I have his records here in front of me.
Yeah.
So in 6 out of these 9 seasons, he had over 100 points.
Right.
And his first season with Washington,
One of those was a lockout year too.
He was hired. Looks like he was hired in like December or something.
Mm-hmm.
And he had 81 points, which was clearly a 100-point pace for a full season. And, and I think it was Travis Yost of TSN who brought up a good point with Anaheim here, as he had 100 points each of the last 3 years, and really Anaheim is a very top-heavy team, but when you get into their depth, they don't have it in their bottom 6 or in their back pair in the defense. So maybe they did overachieve a little bit in Anaheim with him, but
I think you bring up his record, and everyone wants to talk about all the Game 7s that he's lost. But to me, I don't see it as much of a negative as a lot of people do.
I point the fingers for that at the goalies he's had in net, and that's Semyon Varlamov.
Right.
I'm thinking there's a Jose Teodor in there somewhere.
Yeah, I'm sure there is.
Frederick Anderson and John Gibson.
Yeah. But But I mean, even and that's the notes that I took, was that in those Game 7s, he lost to the 2008 Flyers, who went on to the conference finals. The next season, they went on to the Stanley Cup final. 2009, he lost to the Penguins, who won the Cup. In 2010, he did lose to the Habs, who were an 8 seed. That was an upset. But
didn't they run to the
They
final?
went to the conference finals. So, and then another Game 7 he lost. He lost to the Red Wings. They went on to lose to Chicago, who won the Cup. He lost to the Kings the next season. They went on to win the Cup. He lost to the Hawks the next season. They went on to win the Cup. And then this year he lost to the Preds. And let's not make out the Preds to be a gangbusters hockey team or anything. But I think you're allowed one stinker out of the bunch. Every other team he's lost to has either won the Cup or lost to the team that won the Cup.
I still just can't help but think in that Game 7 against Nashville, Corey Perry dekes around 3 defenders and then has the goalie dead to rights, has an empty net to shoot at, and he just puts a backhander on the outside of the cage, which would have tied the game.
Yep.
And had he actually tied the game, would this even be happening right now?
No, it probably wouldn't. Because then they would be facing the Sharks, and as good as the Sharks have been playing, they've been playing pretty well against Nashville, who, again, I'm not really super enthused about. I think the Ducks match up pretty well against the Sharks, and I think they're on their way to yet another conference final. So it's a game of inches, as we well know. It's a game of missed opportunities like that, as we well know, as we learned the hard way from the Wild Dallas series, as ludicrously inconsistent as this Wild team is, they were still 2 skate bounces away from basically winning that series, or at least bringing that series to 7. That's just kind of how it is, and so I don't hold those Game 7 losses against Bruce Boudreau as much as look at the regular season. That's the actual body of work.
Right.
He's got a 1-7 record in Game 7s. I don't know how you pit every single one of those on him. I certainly, maybe there were some coaching decisions made in there that were questionable. I'm sure there was, it's not played in a vacuum, but I just don't think that you hang, as much as you can't really blame him for losing all those Game 7s. It's like giving, the Wild franchise credit for winning every Game 7 they've been in. Does that mean this team is never going to lose a Game 7? No, it doesn't.
No.
And just like Bruce Boudreau is never going to lose every Game 7. That's just playoff hockey. That's what we've seen. And a lot of the times it comes down to goaltending, and Boudreau hasn't had elite goaltending. And obviously, Devin Dubnyk's name probably gets mentioned in this argument, but that doesn't mean that he can't have success. He had plenty of success with less than elite goaltending before. I mean, he's made it to a couple conference finals. He's made it, he's given Stanley Cup champions the biggest run for the money they got all playoff long in Pittsburgh, in LA, and in Chicago, the 3 Cup champions that he's lost to in Game 7s. He's given them more of a run for money than they got in the Stanley Cup final. So I really don't hold this record against him. And the point that we talked about last week is, who else would you rather have? All of the naysayers, talking, and I don't think anyone's even dumb enough to talk that much crap about Boudreau today, at least. But who are you going to hire instead? Yeah, it would be, that's kind of what it comes down to everything. It's the same thing with the naysayers about Dubnyk. It's like, all right, well, what goalie do you go out and get? Don't worry, I'll wait. Like, Boudreau is the best option out there, and it was not close. There wasn't even a coin flip involved.
Like, there's been some rumblings that maybe, like, Daryl Sutter could be available. And, that remains to be seen.
Right.
You don't want to just sit on your hands and see if he becomes available, and then
what?
By the time he's not, then, Boudreau's probably gone.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I mean, if you want to wait around, you can't. You can't wait around for Sutter, because it sounds like he's going to string this out as long as he possibly can to see what LA does with the roster, which, on one hand, it kind of handcuffs LA in a really brutal way. But on the other hand, I kind of don't blame him, because, you want to know what you're dealing with. He wants to win a cup again. He's not the youngest guy in the room. So, he wants to know what he's going into next season with. So I just don't see waiting around for him as being a viable option if you're serious about getting a good hockey coach.
If you're the Kings, either Daryl Sutter's your coach next year, or John Stevens, your assistant coach right now, is probably going to be your head coach if Sutter doesn't return, because Stevens is a very highly sought-after assistant who the Kings just keep kind of blocking from letting him leave. But That's another discussion for another day. I was trying to look up just kind of the fancy stats on Boudreau's teams, but it doesn't work on my phone for whatever reason. Damn to me for not doing that before I came here.
Sure.
But, correct me if I'm wrong, but, most of his teams, have pretty good puck possession numbers over the years. And, the Wild have just been kind of a mediocre team in that department here in the last, 5 years. Or actually, maybe even ever. If you kind of think about it.
Yeah.
So, maybe they'll kind of get it figured out. They definitely have, good puck movers on this team.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think, and I'll probably write about this for tomorrow, but this is going to be Boudreau's most interesting job yet, because before, he got dropped into a team with Ovechkin, Backstrom, et cetera, and then he gets dropped into a team with Getzlaf, Perry, et cetera. I don't think it's too brutal to say this is the least talented team that he's coached, because I think you can make arguments that beyond Ovechkin, those Capitals teams weren't particularly great. And
I don't think they were deep.
No, they weren't. And same thing with the Ducks. You have Getzlaf and Perry, but beyond that, their third and fourth lines were, I don't want to say they were laughable, but I certainly don't think they were as good as the third line of the Wild this year, or even going into next season, depending on what it is.
Right, and I think the Wild are kind of, regardless of what happens this summer, they're going to go into next year with at least three lines that are going to be able to score.
Yeah,
or should be able to.
And also, it's, very arguable, very possible that this is probably the most talented defensive team that he's ever coached.
I would agree with that.
Because, certainly the Capitals during his tenure, they had Mike Green was their shining star as a defenseman, and we all know how well he actually plays defensive hockey.
Hey, he had an 8-game goal streak that one time.
And then the Ducks, they're kind of known as a big and tough team, but they're not really all that impressive defensively either. So
they gave Clayton Stoner a lot of money, which is funny.
That shows how good the Ducks are defensively. So it'll be interesting to see how that meshes with what he likes to do. Given the fact that he doesn't quite have the offensive firepower that he's had in other squads, but he's probably got a much better back end than he's ever had before. So it all will kind of play out and hopefully. And that's not to say, there still could be moves made. We're still in early May. There's very possible that there is a big move made as we've all kind of prognosticated.
And you almost have to.
Right.
You'd be crazy to not to with how this team just goes up and down constantly.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure Boudreau could kind of manage that to a degree, but I think you got to make some moves here to kind of make sure that doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
And that's more to the point of, okay, Chuck got the biggest free agent head coach he could get.
Yep.
Now he's got to put a team out there for him that can win a little more consistently.
Yep, and that's what we talked about at length last week was that he's the best option out there, and the ills that you had for this team, and then we've talked about your reluctance to talk to your friends about the team, but I'm pretty sure I said it last week where I would have friends ask me what's wrong with the Wild, what can fix the Wild, and it's like, well, quite honestly, looking at the roster, they can't really do much. They can deal a defender for a forward, and that's about it. And that's not going to completely solve things. But and I've said, since before the season even ended, what's going to cure this team ultimately, what's going to make this team dangerous as it can be, is a good coach.
Yeah, and somebody who can challenge, some of these underachieving guys daily.
Yep.
And you kind of saw that at the end with Torch, with Koivu and Pominville, who he directly challenged at a practice. And they came out, and both of them had relatively good postseasons.
Yep.
For as short as it was.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I think that, Bruce Boudreau isn't the silver bullet that turns this team into a Stanley Cup contender next season.
No, but he helps.
But absolutely, exactly. He helps tremendously. And as we've seen out of this team, we've seen this team be incredibly manic. And, I think this helps that a ton, and that makes this team kind of dangerous because when we've seen this team good, this team has been really good. And when we've seen it bad, this team has been really bad. And I think with Boudreau, you don't get that really bad nearly as much. I mean, the Ducks had that to start the season, but they were shooting like 3% or something horrific like that as a team.
And I'd also like to point out that their horrifically bad start may have also had something to do with the fact that half the roster from a Western Conference Finals Game 7 team was overhauled.
Yeah.
Like, half the roster was shipped out.
Yeah.
Like, normally you don't have that much roster turnover for a team that is, one game away from the Stanley Cup final.
Yep. Yeah, so I think that, this... I think that the peaks and valleys of the Mike Yeo era are probably smoothed over a little bit. I don't know. Maybe it still happens. Maybe this team, we've talked about them being mentally weak and mentally fragile and whatever. Maybe this team just, that's its personality and it can't shake it no matter what coach. But I think if there's any coach that can smooth that out just a little bit, it's a coach like Boudreau. It's, you weren't going to get that with Torch because as much as he got the reputation as a quote-unquote screamer, we never really saw it. And I don't think that even if he was, it never really came through and it never really translated into this team, believing in itself ultimately.
Right now is a good time to insert the clip of Boudreau's locker room speech from 24/7 where he just goes off because...
I will have that next week and that will be our intro every week.
It's such a wild type speech to give that he will probably have to give several times early on next year. I don't know. I guess there are still problems as we've kind of alluded to, but you've got a now stable guy behind the bench, somebody who's consistently won in the regular season, an area you badly need to improve upon if you want to have home ice advantage in at least the first round of the postseason, like we've been hearing for the last 3 years.
Right. Well, and as you mentioned before, he's won 8 division titles in 9 years, and that one year he didn't was he got fired from the Capitals. They were 12-9-1 at the time, mind you.
Yeah, it wasn't
like
bad, but for their standards, that was not good.
It wasn't a 9-game losing streak to start a season. It wasn't that kind of situation where he got fired, and then he took over the Ducks and went 27-3-8 for the rest of the season with the Ducks, which they didn't make the playoffs. That's the only time that he has made the playoffs, but
27-23-8.
Yeah,
that'd be a ridiculous record. 27-3-8.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, 23-8. So yeah, I mean, like 8 division titles in 9 years. That and I'm not guaranteeing the Wild win a division title because there is a lot of really good coaches in this division, and also Patrick Waugh.
We're not.
But it's
oh man,
stolen joke, but it's hilarious. But you can't argue with his success in the regular season, and I would argue that he's had a fair amount of playoff success too. It's just the Game 7s haven't worked out for him at all, and I'm not ready to completely crucify him for that.
Not that people are really going to care for this, but his playoff win percentage was in Anaheim was .583, and in Washington over pretty much the same amount of games was .459.
Yeah.
So there was an improvement.
Yeah.
But it's I don't know. I think we kind of hit on this last week that playoff hockey is really now just kind of a big crapshoot with just all the parity in this league.
It is,
but obviously it's going to get to a point where his teams will be expected to make deep playoff runs.
Yeah. No, and as I mentioned, he started John Gibson for the first 2 games of that Nashville series, and I don't want to say, I don't want to be Monday morning quarterback and say that was the bad move and that's ultimately got him fired, but you had Frederick Anderson, who was kind of playoff proven, last season at least, and it was kind of like the starting Jimmy Howard over Peter Mrazek. I just didn't really understand it, and it turned out to not be a good idea.
It felt like in Anaheim, it felt like in the last year, maybe even 2, he just kind of had, management kind of hovering right over his shoulder, making more decisions for him.
Mm-hmm.
like Paul McLean was his assistant, and that was a front office move. That wasn't his decision.
Sure.
That was a front office call, and when you're having management pick your assistants for you and things of that nature, that that's probably not going to end very well. So I'd like to give him the benefit of the doubt, and hopefully, I'm guessing that there's a stipulation in his contract that he'll be getting to pick his own assistants here.
Yeah, he said today on NHL Network that he doesn't know who his assistants are going to be.
And
I'm perfectly fine with him cleaning house, to be honest.
I was going to say,
I think that's what this team needs.
I don't really have anything against the assistants, but it's probably going to be a house cleaning.
Yeah, and I think they'll get jobs elsewhere.
I
think that this assistant staff has proven that they, are at least worthy of being NHL coaches.
Right,
maybe Andrew Burnett might make a different argument for that, but I think Yo takes a couple of them with at least if he gets a job somewhere.
If Yo gets a job, I'm guessing he might bring Rick Wilson back as his defensive guy, and I think very highly of Rick Wilson. He's done a really good job with the defenseman here. And,
yeah.
I don't know about Sador.
I don't know that he sticks around.
Stuff.
He doesn't have any connections to Boudreau either.
Right, and I'm guessing they all won't be back next year.
Yeah.
And we'll have some new assistants, and maybe that's needed too. Maybe a smaller reason for the brief Torchetti era was very similar to the Yo 2/3 of the season he had was they still had the same assistants.
Yep.
Maybe you just need entirely new voices, not just one in there. But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
And that's going to be on Boudreau too, because I don't know that he has a great reputation for developing players. He's kind of been plunked down on teams with superstars already existing. So that makes the assistant hirings that he makes pretty huge. Because those are the guys who spend the most time one-on-one with your players, and those are going to be the guys that turn into an all-star, that turn Charlie Cole into an all-star, that turn Spurgeon, Scandella, Jonas Brodin, Dumba, whatever, into all-stars. That'll be the interesting thing to see who he brings on as assistants and what kind of track record they have as far as developing good young talent into really good talent.
Yeah, well,
I'm sure we'll find out soon.
See how that goes. Yeah, and his introductory press conference is on Tuesday.
Yep.
I know you really wanted to be there. Hear him drop 50 F-bombs, but
alas,
it'll be interesting to see what he says. I know there's a YouTube video of Mike Yo's press conference from when he was introduced out there and it'd be interesting to go back and kind of see what he said and compare to what actually happened. But I'll be interested to see what.
Well, that was a completely different team that he took over too. So
yeah,
there is that.
Your top line was Danny Heatley, Miku Koivu, and Devin Setaguchi. Yeah. So yeah, we'll have plenty more to talk about Boudreau over the coming weeks.
Absolutely.
Here,
Looking really excited for it, though. I think that just kind of cap that off. This is really a huge coup for the Wild. Something that I think a lot of people predicted them doing, but there's not very often with this team where they make a move and it's pretty consensus that they got it right, that they did an awesome job. I mean, you just don't get that a whole lot in sports, but this is one of them. And even nationally, we've seen a lot of people are like, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is exactly what this team needs. It's a great coaching hire. People questioning it, I just don't know where they're coming from. And that's rare. So that's the good news, definitely.
Crap, I forgot what I was going to say. We'll get more into that over the coming weeks. We're in no hurry to get everything all out there right now. We've got plenty more podcasts to do before summer vacation.
Plenty more time to fill.
So yeah, we got a lot of dead air. We've almost killed a half hour on this topic alone.
Which is totally fine. I mean, it's a big deal. Yesterday was a huge day in Wild history, and And I had said before, this summer that this is maybe the summer that ends up defining this franchise. This coaching hire ends up defining this franchise. And so far, so good. You can't really. This is a lot more exciting than, say, if they would have hired Paul McLean or Guy Boucher or something like that.
I noted this last night on Twitter that this is just a big one of quite a few big check marks on their off-season to-do list.
Yes.
Now I believe that their next big check has got to be finding a top-line center, and we can kind of get into that at a different time. But I had some interesting conversations with some people, and they're just like, you're not going to get a top-line center. It's like, well, then you got to take a gamble on somebody who you think can be,
right?
Because you have to at this point.
Yeah, and it's like players that a lot of people are talking about, like Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, for instance, is a very popular name, especially on the blogosphere, the Twitter sphere, whatever. Is he a top line center right now? No, I don't think he is. But I mean, he's what, 24? 23, yeah. So I think he's the perfect candidate,
right?
For something like that, where it's like, yeah, no, he's not. You're not going to confuse him for Jonathan Taves anytime soon,
right?
But he's got much more potential to get to an all-star level than I'm sorry, but Mikael Granlund or even Eric Haula maybe.
And before this year, he was kind of trending in that direction.
Yeah,
he kind of had a down year, and now it just seems he's blocked on the depth chart by McDavid and Draisaitl.
Rightfully so. Again, I mean, those are absurdly talented players.
Again, I think we hit on this last week. And then my other two big check marks, weren't really of, hockey ops nature, but one was dump the red jerseys. And the other, which somebody had to remind me of, was make Let's Go Crazy the goal song on a permanent basis.
I gotta think they already have kind of decided on that.
I hope so, because
I mean, I would like it that they would announce it.
I haven't seen anyone, say no to that. So
right, and I don't. Maybe that's not the kind of thing that they just throw a press release about. But
right.
and maybe they only had one game to use it. Basically, it was Game 6.
We probably won't see that until
next
October.
Yeah, until the preseason, but. I gotta think that's already in the bag.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just it's way too good. It's way too fitting. It's just it worked out so well, and obviously it unfortunately took the tragedy of losing Prince to kind of get to that point. But there are a lot of people, like we had mentioned at the time. A lot of people have been griping about the goal song for a long time. So it's time. It's time for a change. And the red jerseys, I'm with you, but it's not going to happen this year. Otherwise, we would have heard about it already. A la the Florida Panthers and the Maple Leafs. So I think that's an Adidas thing. When Adidas comes in 2017, I think that's basically, that's when teams make the change. So I'm looking forward to that and all the changes that come with it. Hopefully it's not a Reebok Edge type situation.
Yeah. All right. I guess we're going to kind of move along here. We're going to start looking at, as we get closer and closer to the offseason, we're going to look at, free agents and RFAs and trades potentially to make. And today we're going to get into the Wild's UFAs.
Yeah.
And who should we keep, or should we just say goodbye? And there's a few names here on this list, although I will point out that it took me all the way down to the 14th player on the list to find the first UFA.
Yeah, it's not
list
really
of scoring.
Right. So it's not, if they, I don't know that there's a player where I'm like, they have to bring this UFA back. I don't know if there's a player like that. There's certainly some ones that I would prefer to bring back over others. But, I mean, you're basically looking to build the fourth line. You have your top three lines pretty much locked down, barring a trade, obviously. But you would think you're filling forward lines with that trade more than anything. So, you basically have to build a fourth line out of your UFAs. And that's a good thing. I mean, you don't want a fourth line full of guys with 5-year contracts anyway. So, I don't think it's a bad situation that they're in, that they have to build a fourth line with what little money they have left in the pot.
We'll list them off here, and then we'll kind of elaborate, and we'll give our final, keeper kick. thing. But first on the list was Justin Fontaine. I think he's 28 years old. I
think he's the only player between the ages of 26 and 31 right now. I'm not kidding about that either. I'm pretty sure he's the only one.
He was paid a lump sum of $1 million this year. That was his cap hit, at least. And
right.
He had 5 goals, 16 assists, 5 goals, 11 assists in 60 games. He was hurt for a good chunk of time there, but
he's also scratched a fair amount here and there too, unfortunately.
I know he's kind of one of the analytics darlings, if you will.
Yeah.
So I guess what do you think of bringing back Fontaine?
I think because of that analytic darling, he's very polarizing. I think that a lot of people who are in the, let's face it, anti-analytics camp, I think that they want to get rid of him. They would be fine getting rid of him just because. And certainly the fight that the analytics community has put up for him has probably soured those anti-analytics folks on him. I'm kind of in the middle. I think you can bring him back on a deal that makes sense. And I do appreciate what he brings to the team. I think he has times where he is, one of the better players out there. I think he shows flashes of being a really good hockey player. But in fairness, I think there's also some times where he doesn't quite show up. Times where you just really don't hear his name throughout a whole game. So I don't know. I don't know that I would call him an inconsistent player, but it just seems like for as good as his numbers show, and I've looked at all the fancy stats too. I'm kind of 1 foot in with those guys. I do see that out of him. I do see that part of his game, but at the same time, I see the side that the old-fashioned eye test people harp on, and that's just there's occasions where he's really inconsequential in games. So I would like to see him bring him back, just on the basis of I would like to see what he does under Boudreau. I think that you're doing really well if he's a guy that's on your fourth line. Maybe you don't want to have him as a second liner, as they've had to out of necessity a couple of times. But I think you could really do a whole lot worse with your fourth line, and hopefully the price tag isn't too steep. I think if you can lock him up for under $2 million a year or in that range. I don't know how realistic that is, and I don't know what other teams think of him, but I think that you do. I think that you sign him, to a certain point. I don't think you give him a blank check, but I think you definitely try to bring him back.
And I was thinking about this and just reflecting. His season this year was just so night and day in comparison to last season. And
yeah.
Just how much I thought of him, and he was out for the Chicago second round series last year, and I just came out of that series going, they really missed Fontaine in that series. Like he just had a presence that was really needed, and they didn't have. And then this year, I don't know what it was, but he was just battling, inconsistency all year, and there was just times where it was just like. Yeah, I don't blame you for putting him on the bench,
right?
Because he was playing bad, and
I think in the Dallas series, I don't think he played particularly well at all in the Dallas series, and he ended up getting benched.
4 playoff games, and I don't have the time on ice stats in front of me, but I can't imagine that he was getting much more than 10 minutes.
No, I don't think he was either.
But I'm guessing at this point he's probably looking for maybe a 2-year deal because of his age, and if that's the case, then I would say pass. But if you can get him down to a 1-year deal, just to kind of see, okay, was last year just kind of a fluke, and maybe you can be on the fourth line, and if you can play like you used to, great. That's a good bargain. But
I would give him a 2-year deal if it's $2 million or under. I would probably give him a 2-year deal. The cap hit would probably be more of a concern to me than the length, because they're so strapped for cash right now to build that fourth line.
You'd have to be willing to sacrifice some money in there to make it worth my while. But
yeah, I agree.
And I don't know. I guess when push comes to shove, I would say pass. Just because I think there needs to be some change, and I don't know. He's 28. Probably not expecting great things out of him, and
I think he is what he is at this point. Yeah.
Right. I would pass unless he was willing to take just a 1-year deal and very, very minimal salary, like what Carter made this year.
Right. That'll be the interesting part, is if the Wild do not sign him, is the kind of contract that he lands. Because certainly, I mean, as we've said, the analytics community loves him. So it'll be interesting to see if, somebody comes out of freaking nowhere, gives him a 4-year deal for $12 million or something like that. I doubt that, but if somebody does give him a 3-year deal for even $3 million a year or somewhere in that range, that'll tell you who's pulling the strings there.
And I'm guessing that Chuck Fletcher will have his analytics department in his ear, just kind of saying, you might want to take one more chance on this guy.
Yep. Yeah.
I did mention Ryan Carter a few seconds ago, and he's next on my list.
Sure.
60 games, 7 goals, 5 assists. He had a cap hit of $625,000. I'll kind of start with this one. I'm just going to say pass. I think, I wasn't super impressed with him at all this year, and, I don't know, unless you want somebody in there just for that grinders mentality on the fourth line, which I don't know if you really need that bad if Chuck Fletcher's all gung-ho about having Curtis Gabriel in the lineup next year. I don't know, it just feels like you could probably find something better, because I think Carter's 30, 31, something like that.
Well, and the interesting thing is, too, they've got Tyler Graovac kind of waiting in the wings, and he's a guy that can definitely be a fourth-line center for you. So you don't need Carter to be your fourth-line center. But Carter does play the wing. I think with all of these guys, I don't know that I can give a definitive thumbs up, thumbs down, because if we re-sign Carter for another 1-year, $625K deal, I'm not going to be upset about it. I think that's what you pay a fourth liner / 22nd guy on your roster, which I think that's what Carter is. I liked what he did in the defensive zone. He brought a very minute amount of offense, but it could have been, less for sure. So I don't know if you're going to bring him back for a 1-year minimum deal. I would do it, but otherwise, I'm with you. If it's any more than that, I let him walk, because as much as I appreciate what he can do on the penalty kill and in the defensive zone or whatever, I think he's still a player that's kind of a dime a dozen.
And stop me if I'm wrong, but I don't think he was a big fan of Torch at the end here.
I don't know.
I could be wrong, but because it felt like, because he was getting benched, so I felt like it kind of came out that he was not a huge fan of Torch, so maybe they do bring him back next year, just kind of on that minimum deal. But
it'll be interesting too to see if Boudreau has any say in these decisions, because I think that Yo had not ultimate say. Obviously, I think Fletcher's still where the buck stops, but I'm sure Yo had some input as far as to the roster construction and guys he liked. He certainly had his guys. I mean, he had a bromance with Nate Prosser that's probably still ongoing. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see, if what Bruce Boudreau wants to put his team together like. And to the Curtis Gabriel point, I wouldn't be shocked to see him on the fourth line more often than not next year. A stat that some people probably want to ignore is Boudreau's Ducks this year led the league in fights. And certainly the Wild don't have that kind of roster.
Wow.
But Curtis Gabriel is that kind of player, so...
maybe that had to do more with how the Anaheim roster was built. Maybe not more a reflection of the coach, but...
No, I agree. I think that there was more of a roster thing than a Boudreau telling guys to go out and fight, but I also think that Boudreau is a fiery guy. Fights come from emotion, and Boudreau is a pretty emotional guy. So I think that, whether it was intended or not, that's a consequence of having that kind of coach, is that you're going to get a little bit more fire out of your players, and sometimes when you get fire out of your players, you get people dropping the gloves. So I think it's just kind of like a fair warning, as kind of like a warning flare, Curtis Gabriel could see significant time this year with the Wild just because he's he's that type of guy that is willing to drop the gloves, and I don't think Boudreau is looking for an enforcer, but I think he's a guy who can appreciate a player who can do that once in a while, and they don't really have anybody else on the roster who can.
No.
Hey, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that's kind of how I see it because, it is what it is. I mean, the Ducks led the league in fights. That has a lot to do with the fact they're all kind of a bunch of hulking idiots over there. But
Duckwads.
Yeah, exactly. And the Ducks definitely had an air of douchiness to them, and that probably had a lot to do with it. They've got Clayton Stoner and Perry and Getzlaff aren't really known as humanitarians or anything like that, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit more of that creep into the Wild's game with Boudreau as opposed to Yo and Torch. Sorry, not sorry.
All right. On to the next one. If we don't start moving through these.
It's going to be another hour and a half podcast.
Next on the list is Chris Porter. 61 games, 4 goals, 3 assists. Cap hit was $575,000. I'll let you have the floor on this one.
Chris Port. Can't take enough for all the time. I almost want to see him go because of the Parise factor. No, I mean, not that I want to spite Zach or anything, but just the kind of nepotism. Just kind of the nepotism that is. It's not nepotism, but the buddy system that is. I just didn't think Porter really brought anything to this team.
No,
I mean, he had nights where it was oh, that was a nice hustle play. You'd get that out of him. Maybe if he had a good game, he had 3 of those where you're hey, Chris Porter's playing.
He had that. I think it was game 1 where somebody tabbed him the best forward.
Torch did
on the team.
Torch called him the best forward on the team, which is
which was a fair assessment.
I think he was right, but that's definitely
it's not good when Chris Porter's your best forward in a playoff game.
That's definitely a shiniest turd situation right there. So, I think you let him.
Roses.
Yeah, exactly. I think you let him go. Much like Ryan Carter. If they bring him back on a 1-year veteran minimum deal, I'm not going to be pissed about it. If he's a guy that ends up in the press box more often than not, I'm fine with that as a roster filler. If he wants to be Zach Parise's roommate on the road, whatever. But certainly not a lot of people might be willing to. But otherwise, let him go. There's no reason for him to be on this team.
I had this discussion a week ago on Twitter with I forget who it was, but if you want to bring Porter back for a 1-year deal, at the same cap hit as a 13th forward, a guy who's going to play, 30, 40 games.
Yeah.
I'm okay with it.
Me too.
We're fine with it. But when he's playing 61 games, then that's kind of where I draw the line. He doesn't do a lot to inspire. Inspires a whatever. If he's playing in 61 games, then you have a problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think 30 or 40 is a more fair.
And along those lines with the 13th forward thing, I think you have to choose between him and Carter, not both. I mean, good God, there's no reason why you should have both those guys in the roster.
I wonder who that's going to be.
And when push comes to shove, I'd take Carter. I think he's been more of an asset to this team, especially on the penalty kill. I would take Carter, and sorry Zach Parise, but I'm taking Carter, and that's just kind of how it is.
I worry that because he had seemingly a average postseason for a 4th liner,
right?
That they're just going to be we should bring him back for some ridiculous salary. A 1-year deal.
I don't think they can possibly give him anything more than that, whatever he was making this year.
I'm going to pass.
Yeah.
I
would
move
too.
on. Like
Yep.
I feel like you can find better fourth liners out there, and that's why I'm just passing on all these guys. Like, just get some fresh blood in here.
True. No, and that's not a part that should be discounted. As much as I like what Carter brought, I'm totally fine if they, like I said, he's dime a dozen. You know, him, Porter, I see them as dime a dozen. If you let him walk and you bring in some other guys, maybe Boudreau has some guys out there. You know,
Right.
he's certainly coached, you know, for quite a while in the NHL. I'm sure he's got some
there might be a
Nate
guy
Prosser
or two that he
bromances of his
likes
own,
that,
you know, so.
can bring something.
Yeah.
If you're not going to be able to, you know, overhaul or, you know, make a somewhat decent move up front on forwards, then, you know,
Yep.
you got to kind of overhaul the fourth line at least and find something else. And
Yeah.
that kind of brings us to our next one, Jarrett Stoll, who was a waiver claim in November, if I recall correctly.
Yes, he was.
He had 51 games, 3 goals, 3 assists, a ridiculous shooting percentage.
Because he didn't take many shots.
He had 23 shots. So
Oh, God, he had 23 shots. How many games did he play here?
51.
Okay. That's bad.
Again, early on, I thought Stoll was bringing something valuable to the team, despite maybe what the analytics were saying about him. But then, as the season wore on, he just kind of got worse and worse. And then the playoffs, he was just a liability. And so I'm a pass. I'm a hard pass. If there's anyone that I am firmly in the camp of pass on, it is him. Please do not bring him back.
Yeah. I'll do mine in drop form here. Jarrett Stoll. Yeah, that's my verdict.
So, all right. This one we might actually have a good discussion on. Jordan Schrader only got in 26 games. I don't have Iowa stats in front of me because why would I want to?
Why would you do that?
2 goals, 2 assists, and then I guess he kind of had a somewhat decent 2 games in the postseason where he actually had a goal, and he was kind of noticeable on the fourth line there, I believe. So, what do you think?
Yeah, you know, come to think of it, I should have been using drops for them the whole time. It's okay, though. The problem is, with our podcast, I don't have any positive drops, so that might be a problem.
Number 1.
You know, I think that Schrader kind of falls in the same camp as Fontaine for me. I don't think that Schrader is an analytics darling by any stretch, but I certainly appreciate what he can bring to this team on occasion. He's kind of like Zucker light in that he's got speed, and once in a while you can spring him, and it's kind of exciting. And if, you know, there's ever a sport where one tool can carry you, and that speed is hockey. So I would like to see them bring him back. If they don't, I'm not super heartbroken about it, but I think you could do a lot worse with your fourth line than Jordan Schrader. And the fact that he's a guy who can kind of plug into one of your top 3 lines, preferably your second or third line. I think that just the fact that he's a guy like that, much like Fontaine, where you can plug him in and it's not a complete disaster. I think you bring him back, and I don't think it's going to be terribly expensive, given the fact that he hasn't really spent a lot of time up. And if you sign him, you know, to a minor league deal, and then he plays in Iowa, and he's your emergency guy.
Right.
That's also a good situation too. I don't think he's going to have a whole lot of offers otherwise. So,
and I forgot to mention his salary or his cap hit was $600,000.
Yeah,
he was on a 2-way deal.
Yep. Yeah, I think if you give him another 2-way deal, I really like that. You know, if you've got him on the top line in Iowa, and then as soon as you have an injury, he's the first call up. I think that's exactly what you want out of a guy like Schroeder.
That's exactly my thought.
Yep.
You know, you can bring him back on a 2-way deal, and you know, you can kind of have him plug him into the fourth line if you need to. Great. But if he's kind of looking to move on, then you know, I'm not heartbroken.
Yeah.
So
agreed.
All right, on to David Jones. Who was acquired at the deadline in the Nicholas Backstrom trade. Hefty cap hit of $4 million this past year.
Yeah,
but
that was inconsequential given what Backstrom was. But
in 16 games, he had 2 goals and an assist, and only 1 assist in the postseason.
Sure.
So,
and that was playing with Mikko and
he had some,
Granlund,
he had some
correct?
time up, kind of higher up, but
Yep.
I wouldn't be terribly opposed to bringing him back, maybe on a 1-year deal, just to kind of see what he has and give him a full season with this group. But if he kind of demands a kind of a multi-year deal, then I'll just say pass.
Yeah, I don't know what the market holds for him. Obviously, he's not going to get $4 million. That much is clear. But I just get the feeling that he's going to command a little bit more than a 1-year $1 million, basically, or under $2 million deal. For that reason, I basically let him walk because I think it's going to take more than what he's worth. Plus, when you sign him, his team's top 9 is kind of already locked in, barring a trade. If you sign him, then where do you put him? I don't think he's the type of guy that's going to sign here knowing that he's going to sit, that he's tagged for the 4th line. He's a nice guy to have to plug into the top 9, like they did down the stretch when they lost Vanek and Parise, but I don't think that he's a guy that you're really too excited about having on your 4th line or even having in your top 9. So I don't know what the market holds for him, though. I think that maybe he could be had on a super cheap deal, and I would be fine with giving him that. It's kind of maybe in the same boat as Carter and Porter, where if you can get him relatively cheap, I think that's fine. But anything more than $2 million a year, anything more than 2 years, I'm not going anywhere near him. I mean, I
wouldn't even go.
I don't even. Yeah, exactly.
I wouldn't even go to $2 million.
I don't even know that I would go that far. But I mean, if it's anything even close to that, I think you let him walk.
For me, if it's over $1.5 million, that's probably too much for my blood.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
I would. We'll see. I guess I'm not overly an expert on, kind of predicting what the free agent market's going to do, but it seems like there's some good forwards to be had this summer, so you might be able to find a guy out there on a bargain for a 1-year deal, just to plug him on your 4th line, but that kind of remains to be seen.
And if you say Kyle Oposo's name, I'll stab you.
No, the Wild do not need to sign him. They do not need to sign David Backes. They need to kind of start making some trades and finding good players who are young.
If anything, this team needs less Minnesota players.
Yeah, we also don't need more one of us connections.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of does it for the UFAs. Next week we'll do the RFAs, and we'll probably have more spirited discussions on those guys because
there's a couple.
There's a few.
There's a couple that are pretty important.
That kind of kills it for our wild discussion.
Sure.
But the Stanley Cup playoffs are still happening, even though the Wild are not in it. There's still.
You might not know that, but
there's still good hockey to be had, and as we're recording here, we got. Tampa Bay looks like they're on their way to finishing off the Islanders.
Yeah.
That somebody kind of threw this. I hadn't really thought of this, but Tampa Bay, for being a 2 seed in the Atlantic Division, kind of had a cakewalk to the Eastern Final. Yeah. They had no Stamkos, they had no Strowman. Yeah. They ran into the Detroit Red Wings, who just
kind of
seemingly get in their own way all the time. And then they caught the New York Islanders, who, unfortunately, they're without their starting goaltender, Yar Halak. They got Thomas Greiss in there. He hasn't been bad, but
I think Greiss is
kind of a noticeable
upgrade.
Been noticeable in this series, and assuming, of course, they close this out today, you kind of wait and see, what happens with Caps and Pens, and then I'm guessing the Eastern Finals start next weekend, and, who knows, Strowman could return, and maybe even Stamkos could return, and
that could shape up to be a hell of a series.
Yeah.
The Caps or the Pens against the Lightning. I mean, the Lightning were just in the final last year, so that's pretty exciting. And then, obviously, Pens and Caps, they just had game 5 yesterday, where the Caps managed to win one, and so that series is 3-2. Going to Pittsburgh,
still
though,
breathing.
yeah, and I don't know, I'm really holding out on hope that series goes 7. But as I've talked about, I won't be upset either way. I think it's been a great series so far. It's been a lot of fun to watch, and I have a lot more hope for the next round for either one of those teams being really good too, because it looks like the Lightning are playing very well, as opposed to the first round. So I think that either way, it's still a lot of good hockey to be played.
And more to the point on the Caps and Pens, kind of switching over to that series, is you kind of look at look at those 3 games that Washington lost consecutively.
Yeah.
Those were all close games. They could have easily won, all of them. And I think what we saw last night in Game 5 that that was more reflective of the Washington team that we really hadn't seen all series, and that we saw in the regular season. And I was also kind of thinking yesterday before the game that Braden Holtby, even though he's been good, has been outdueled by Matt Murray in this series.
Yeah,
and
until yesterday.
Braden Holtby's going to win the Vezina, and he's being outdueled by Matt Murray, 23 years old, who was in Wilkes-Barre to begin the year.
Yeah.
Tampa Bay has scored again, so I think we're
kind of
bidding
a nail
adieu
in
to
the
the New
coffin.
York Islanders.
Yeah. They no longer have the worst lead in hockey.
Thank God, because I was really tired of the Barclays Center schedule not allowing hockey to be played. Good Lord. And they had the boards fall apart the other night.
Did you hear about that? How that happened, though?
How did that happen?
The Zamboni hit it. I'm not joking. That's how that happened. The Zamboni ran into the doors as it left the ice, and that's what caused the boards to get misaligned. It's like, that kind of thing can only happen in Brooklyn. What a donkey show.
I don't know. Anyway, going back to Pittsburgh and Game 6 on Tuesday, it will be interesting to see what happens. And
very excited for that.
If Braden Holtby's going to have to kind of steal another game, if they can get it to a Game 7, anything's possible. And but it starts with Holtby and for the Caps, and as everybody who kind of regularly listens to this podcast know, I'm very pro Washington. So I would really like Washington to get past this round. And
it'll also be interesting too, because I don't think Murray had a bad game yesterday, but if Murray is
that last goal was not good,
right? If Murray is not sharp on Tuesday, do they turn to Fleury?
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Fleury
for Game 7
in a long time, and you toss him into a Game 7.
Yeah, I don't think that happens. But if Murray completely collapses in Game 6, it's entirely possible. You certainly got a lot of history with Marc-Andre Fleury there. So
just be a lot of irony, and say the Caps turn it around, win this series after losing a 3-1 series lead against the Rangers in the second round last year.
Right. Yeah.
And then I was up late last night watching the Sharks just take a
annihilate
dump
the Preds. Holy Christ.
The Preds, and that kind of just maybe that game just kind of showed you that maybe Nashville wasn't the right team to come out of the first round.
Yeah,
but it happens. And
that series has turned into a nice little series. I didn't have very high hopes for it all. I kind of thought the Sharks would run away with it. But it's going at least 6. And, Nashville has certainly been pretty decent at home. So, I don't know. It could end up being a really good 7-game series out of those two teams, which you didn't necessarily see coming. But, I wrote about it in my preview where it's like, well, these teams are pretty evenly matched, so don't be surprised if it turns into a good series. And we obviously had the triple overtime on Thursday night, which, was a phenomenal game. I thought that was a pretty good game, in addition to it going to triple overtime. So I think that series is pretty good. I'm interested to see who comes out. I still think the Sharks get it done in Game 6. And if not, they definitely get it done in Game 7, I think, at home, because the Preds just really can't touch them at home right now. So I don't know, but that's been a pleasant surprise. That series has been pretty good.
So I just thought of this here as we were talking, and I made some predictions for the second round on Twitter prior to their start, and
sure.
As we sit, here's what I had: Lightning over Islanders in 5, which is
close enough.
Just going to happen. It's 3-0.
Oh,
This is game 5.
Oh, yeah, you're right. You're right. Oh, yeah, dead on.
Caps over Pens in 7.
Ooh.
Blues over the Stars in 6.
That could happen as well.
And I had to wait a day to get the last one in, but I had the Sharks over the Preds in 6.
Wow. You could go 4 for 4.
Yep. But
That's
now that
awesome.
I said this, it will all fall apart.
I actually like I think the Blues do get it done. I think the Blues do get it done in 6. They've just kind of, Dallas has kind of done the same thing they did with the Wild, where they're kind of a heavyweight boxer in that they've got a good punch. But otherwise, they're just getting kind of dominated as far as the rest of the game goes. But they can definitely quick strike, and they've done that. That's how they beat the Blues in the 2 games they have. And basically, that's how they beat the Wild in the couple of games that they did. So, I just think that the Blues have a better all-around game. I think Brian Elliott is playing phenomenally right now.
Yeah, he's playing out of his mind.
Kari Lehtinen is kind of a joke, and Antoniemi is a complete dumpster fire.
They just keep flopping between goalies, and it's not working. You can only go to that bag of tricks. So many times.
That only works for the 2003 Wild. That's that's the only time it worked.
Yeah, you have to have above average goaltenders for that to work. And
so yeah, I do. I like the Blues to get it done in 6, and I really do hope that Caps Pens game goes to 7, because that game 7 will be lit.
If it does go to 7, I'll miss it. I have to work that night.
Oh, dude.
So I might, depending on what I think, I might DVR it and watch it when I get home and try to just shut everything out. But
I'm going to text you
that's so hard to do in this day and age.
It's super hard. Alrighty, so I guess we can.
We can hit our. We got two more segments here. We're gonna try and blow through them. The jersey segment. This sounds like this is our last.
It might be. I'll have to double check our list, and maybe some listeners. I don't think we've kept track, but
technically done the Wild as the jersey segment.
I don't think we have.
We've talked about them enough over time.
You know our opinions on those jerseys
together. But our last team is Montreal, who weirdly got left out until now. And
when I made this schedule, I kind of looked at who the Wild were playing every week, obviously, and then the teams that I set aside. This schedule was made in November.
Yeah, this was
so the teams that I set aside were teams that were in the Central, because I figured we'd be seeing them eventually, especially in the playoffs. And I set aside teams that I thought would be in the playoffs for sure too, like the Kings and like the Canadiens.
Didn't Montreal win the first 8 games of the year?
Yeah, so I wasn't wrong in leaving them out, but man, did things go south.
When you rely on your goaltender to win you games, and then your goaltender gets hurt and misses the rest of the year,
it's not going to go well for you.
It's not going to end well.
Mike Condon filled in admirably, but he's no Carey Price.
No, and Habs jerseys are pretty simple, and they've remained pretty constant over the years, and it's kind of one of the more iconic looking jerseys, crests in sports.
Yeah, I actually took a couple of fun factoids on the Habs jerseys. They've actually had basically the same jersey design since 1947. They've made some tweaks here and there, mostly with the numbers and the letters, and a couple of outlines coming and going, but the basic same design since 1947. 84 to 97, they kept the exact same jersey the whole time. They weathered the entire 90s storm without even a tweak to their jerseys, which is really impressive. And they've never had a third jersey either.
Tip your cap to them.
Yes, exactly. They've never had a third jersey, and the only thing they've ever used for World or any kind of alumni, or any kind of Winter Classic or Heritage game, has been a jersey they've worn before, a classic jersey, like they did this year. They wore their jerseys from I think like the 40s, or even earlier than that. So it's quite impressive, and my caps off to them, where they've created. They created an iconic jersey, and they've really stuck with it. I mean, like no one else really has in sports. They've really stuck with their design, and as well they should. I don't know where do you think is it the top hockey jersey, or is it top 3
to
for
me?
you?
It's not the top to me, but it's up there. I mean, I would probably put it at least in my top 5, and I don't know, maybe sometime this summer I'll actually put a list together of top jerseys, but it is up there, but I mean, my love for the New York Rangers jersey has no bounds, and
I might go as bold as to say that it is the top NHL jersey for me, just for how iconic it is. I mean,
there is a lot of history behind it.
I think you can't go wrong with any of the top 5 teams that we might name.
No.
But I think that it might just the history that it has, you can't really ignore it. How iconic that logo is, and just the fact they have a stripe around the middle of their jersey, which not a lot of teams do, and they've really kind of made it work. They've made it like a thing, where a lot of teams can't really pull it off like they can. Most teams that run a stripe around the middle of their jerseys end up looking like a rugby jersey reject, and the Habs have pulled it off beautifully. So, and the H in the jersey actually doesn't stand for Habs; it stands for hockey, because it is
little known fact.
Les Club des Canadiens Hockey. People think that it stands for Habs because
get a little French in there.
Yeah, the Rangers owner actually said that the H stood for habitants, and that's what he told the paper, and that's the first evidence they can find of it. It's fun facts. I looked up. It's kind of weird. Everyone thinks that the H is for Habs, and it's not. No. It actually stands for hockey, which is a little weird, but it is kind of cool.
This isn't a jersey complaint, but since we're talking about the Canadiens, they moved out of the Montreal Forum in like 95 or 96 or something.
Yeah.
Which, I get. You want to move into a more modern arena and bring in all that revenue and whatever. Montreal Forum is probably one of, if not the most iconic hockey arena in history. Probably right up there with Maple Leaf Gardens and maybe even Chicago Stadium, if you will.
Yeah.
But after the Canadiens moved out, they gutted it and made it into a movie theater.
Ugh. How do you even make an arena into a movie theater?
You really have to gut it.
I was going to say.
You just strip it down to the 4 walls.
Yeah. Unless you put all the screens in the middle and then put up walls?
I don't know how it is, but that's one of my least favorite facts about hockey arenas is the Montreal Forum got gutted and turned into a movie theater.
You would think with the history in that town, and seeing as how the fact that the NHL Hall of Fame is in Toronto, you would think that the Canadiens would want their own...
Do something...
Right, so their own kind of museum or...
They would have done something better. Maple Leaf Gardens, it kind of took on a similar renovation, but they just made it into a smaller hockey rink.
Right.
And then I think there's a few levels underneath the rink, and they got something else going on in there.
Sure.
But, they're doing something nice with it. I don't know.
Movie theater.
Movie theater, and my history with movie theaters. Yeah. Just a regret.
Yeah.
Well, since I'm now angry about the Montreal Forum, we might as well bring back I don't remember the last time we did this, but it's been a while. We just kind of forgot about it. And something always makes me angry, and yet we forgot this segment for a good chunk of the season. But what grinds my gears? Well, today, this is going to shock you. Today, for the first time in my life, I drove out. This is Sunday. We're recording on a Sunday, Mother's Day.
Yes.
After I took my mom out to breakfast and whatnot, I decided, I looked and I was, I'm out of liquor. There are no liquor stores in this state open.
Yep.
Hey, let's drive a half hour into Hudson. Get some beer. Which, it was nice. It was a nice day to go take a drive, and got to Hudson. A lot of Minnesota plates in the parking lot outside this liquor store. I got some Spotted Cow. Put it in the fridge when I got home before I came down here. Get bent down. It was nice.
Yeah.
My gripe is the archaic no Sunday liquor sales law in Minnesota needs to go. It is 2016. let's grow up and get with the times. Like, I've seen and numerous times this has tried to get through the House and the Senate or whatever, that some of the liquor store owners don't want to open on Sunday.
Yeah.
Guess what? No one is forcing you to open up on Sunday.
Yeah.
You can stay closed.
Actually, funny enough, me and my brother actually talked about this last night when we were here at Tom Reid's, because I guess also in Wisconsin, the liquor stores close at 9 and not 10, so we get an extra hour on them, and they get an extra day on us.
Oh, yeah. They probably, especially them stores in Hudson, they probably just make a killing.
I know. But I don't know. I guess the argument is from the liquor store owners that they wouldn't really bring in a whole lot more revenue. Obviously on the eastern side of the state, or maybe closer to the South Dakota border too, but, stores around the border probably lose out because people just go to Hudson, but otherwise in the middle of the state more, I think people just, hopefully most people kind of plan ahead and stock up on Saturdays. So the argument from them is that they wouldn't miss out on any revenue necessarily, and it would just be added cost. So I'm not going to say that they shouldn't open on Sundays, but I understand why the owners are just like, yeah, we don't want to. It's not, I think it is horribly inconvenient for a lot of Minnesotans, and there's really no reason for it. But
let's get this right. I've been of drinking age for 5.5 years.
Sure.
Yeah. And the fact that I've never had to venture out to Hudson on a Sunday until now shows that I've been pretty good at planning ahead.
Sure.
It needs to go away. It's just one of so many things with Minnesota that just drive me up a tree. It's like...
Did you also know that car dealerships aren't allowed to be open on Sundays?
What?
You didn't know that?
No!
Yeah, they're literally illegal. You cannot be open on a Sunday. That's why they get so geeked up about holidays like Memorial Day and Labor Day, because it's a day that it's another day that people have off that they can be open.
God.
They're literally not allowed to sell cars on Sundays either.
What a state.
And I'm not to. I don't want to completely crap on religion or anything, but it's just like it's archaic. It's. Sunday, I'm sorry, but it is 2016. Sunday is no longer the day of rest for 90% of the population.
Right.
It is kind of silly that the vast, that we have an entire state that holds onto that for two kind of random industries, and maybe there's more. Maybe there's other things that are closed on Sundays I don't even know about. But it's kind of weird, when you boil it down. It's just kind of like, well, why is that? That doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like I said, it hasn't really affected me much. Maybe there's been a Sunday or two where I've wanted to buy some alcohol and haven't been able to, but it's just like it doesn't really make any sense. It's like why are we hanging on to this still? Why is this a thing?
Why is this a thing?
Yep.
That's my big point. It doesn't need to be a thing anymore.
It doesn't.
I don't know. I support Sunday liquor sales, please, from me.
But then you wouldn't have a reason to go to Wisconsin and get Spotted Cow.
I don't.
See?
I don't do that a lot.
Now you're going to go to a Minnesota liquor store.
I feel dirty crossing the border to buy liquor. I just don't want to venture into Wisconsin.
We do it for fireworks too, and that's a whole other argument.
Well,
but
I'm not. My fireworks budget for the calendar year is 0. That is how much I put into it. So
yeah, I probably this. But if Minnesota did sell them, I probably would buy a handful. I don't know. Maybe not.
Anyway,
I don't even know, to be honest.
Check back next week to see what grinds my gears from the state of Minnesota again, because I actually have a list of things that make me irate. So we'll see what happens next week. But I suppose we've rambled on for a good almost 80 minutes now.
Yeah.
We could probably wrap it up.
Shut
I can
it
get
down.
another beverage. We can watch the Islanders sink.
Yep. Sorry, Taylor.
Oh, yeah, I forgot he's the lone Islanders fan out there.
Him and his buddy.
Oh, God. You can find us on the Twitters at Giles Farrell and at Ben Remington. Very simple.
Yes.
You can find our collected works at wildextra.com. check that out, of course. I don't know. I think that I probably...
something that we haven't done, and maybe we should do actually on the podcast instead of on Twitter alone, is whore out for iTunes reviews.
Oh, yeah.
We should probably...
Please review us on
Yes.
iTunes. We finally got enough ratings to where it actually shows up in the search. But
and a
if you
big
are
thanks...
If you are a loyal iTunes listener, and I'm guessing there's more than 5 of you, give us a rating, review. I don't care. It doesn't have to be nice. I don't care.
Yeah.
Just rate us so we can keep going up.
Yeah. Yeah, and everyone who has rated us so far, a big thanks to them, because we've gotten all 5s so far, which is awesome. I don't know what that says about the podcast, but
why do I have this feeling that Dan just made 5 different accounts and just rated us?
But yeah, I mean, huge thanks, and we certainly don't make any money off of this, but if we can grow this, with help of reviews and such, maybe at some point we can. Maybe at some point we can have good reason to buy even fancier equipment than what we already have.
If you want to sponsor this podcast, let us know.
That's an even better point.
We can definitely give you a plug if you for the right price.
We work for very cheap.
We're trying to get the NHL to hire us as jersey consultants for very cheap.
That's not working.
But it's not working. So we'll go lower. Sponsor this podcast.
Yes. For just 1 beer a Sunday, you can sponsor a podcast.
That's a good price. Pick up my bar tab.
That's more than 1 beer, Giles.
But yeah, you can. Thanks for everyone for listening. The last couple of weeks, we've had quite a good number of listens.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing people still want to get their hockey fixed despite no hockey anymore. So we'll continue to be here. So yeah, again, find us at wildextra.com, on Twitter at Giles Farrell, at Ben Remington. Thanks to Tom Reid for putting up with me again.
Norm.
It had been a few weeks, but it's been a few weeks when the bartender says, "Haven't seen you in a while." Oh, God. Just a few weeks. Some people can go away for months and you get that line. I just go away for 2 weeks and haven't seen you in a while.
I didn't even get, "Hey, you were here yesterday."
No, you gotta build up more cred than that.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, we'll be back next week. I don't know. Maybe we'll get back into Grumpy's.
Sure.
Unless there's a roller derby let out or something. I don't know. So yeah, we will talk to you next week.
St. Paul, Minnesota.
Minneapolis, Minnesota. We are ducks, and ducks fly together.
You're soft, you're sloppy. They calling me Pop. I'm rolling in bands, you riding around and I beat up your lap. Hey, dog, bros want a cop, but they are just not on the way. I'm up in the club, stacking the dubs and stuffing a lot.